this is Glover Teixeira, UFC light heavyweight champion.
Hi, I'm Robbie Lawler.
What's up, fight family? This is your favorite MMA coach, Thiago Alves, the Pitbull.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Pedro Munoz.
This is Mike Brown.
Guys, I am Alexei Aleniak. And welcome.
And welcome.
And welcome.
And welcome.
And this is We Want One Picks.
And you're watching We Want Picks.
To We Want Picks.
To We Want Picks.
To We Want Picks.
To We Want Picks. Hi everybody from American Top Picks.
My name's Angelo and welcome to We Want Picks. This is quick picks, so I'm going to try to walk through the entire UFC 271 Adesanya vs. Whittaker 2 fight card in 20 minutes or less, and we have 15 fights, so that is going to be a tall task. If you want a more detailed breakdown with multiple points of views and fantasy information, make sure you like, subscribe, and join our Tuesday night breakdowns every single week where we go in depth on all of these fights. This is quick picks. I'm going to run through my picks. I'm going to give you my bets, and we're going to do every single fight. If you want $50 free dollars, 50 free dollars from us, make sure you go to wewantpicks.com/bets. Sign up with any one of our betting partners. Make a deposit. Let me know after you do, and I'll send you $50. It's literally that simple. Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, however you want it. That's at wewantpicks.com/bets. This breakdown is brought to you by BETU Play to Earn. It is the world's first play-to-earn sports and esports betting game. Check it out now at betuearn.com. That's bet, the letter U, earn.com. And first up, at UFC 271, we have Jeremiah Wells versus Mike Mathetha. They call him Blood Diamond, so if you look him up everywhere, we'll say Blood Diamond. Jeremiah Wells came back after a 2-year layoff and he knocked out Warlley Alves in his UFC debut. He fights like a big, powerful striker with explosive hands. But what everyone forgets is he's a BJJ black belt and a pretty accomplished one at that. He throws wild and with intent, but the reality is most of it is there just to set up his BJJ. His takedowns are pretty good, but what he does do well is transition from one to another. So even if he doesn't have an amazing takedown, he will transition really well to another takedown, pretty much like chain wrestling. Mike Mathetha, who they call Blood Diamond and is literally listed as Blood Diamond on the UFC website and a bunch of others, is a very experienced striker. He has over 100 fights before transitioning to MMA. He's coming out of that city kickboxing gym with Izzy, Dan Hooker, and like 7 other people on this card. So you know he's getting proper MMA training. We've not seen too much by the way of takedown defense from him. So there are still a lot of questions as to what his complete MMA game looks like. If you check out his record, you'll see that Blood Diamond has a submission win on that record. But if you watch the fight and you dig a little deeper, he basically was shoulder thrown and literally landed in a rear naked choke position. So he sucked it up and he got it and he got the win. So good for him. But don't just look at that submission win and think he used, positional jiu-jitsu to get there. I've got to go with Jeremiah here because while he will not be anywhere near the technical striker that Blood Diamond is, he is still dangerous on his feet. He's got solid takedowns, very good BJJ. I like Jeremiah to throw wild, close the distance, and then drop down for takedowns and work jiu-jitsu from there. So I'm going Jeremiah Wells because he's the more complete MMA fighter, but Blood Diamond Mathetha is no joke, very dangerous on his feet. Then we've got Sergey Morozov versus Douglas Silva de Andrade. Douglas Silva, this is his second fight back at 135 after a pretty short stint at 145. If you look at his record, you'll see that he's fought the who's who of former and current champions in multiple weight classes. He's a compact guy with solid boxing and lots of power. He's got solid BJJ on the ground, but it's mostly there as a backup plan because he does not really initiate any offensive wrestling and he's not looking for his own takedowns. His ideal fight is a dirty boxing match inside the pocket. Sergey Morozov is a busy striker who also averages almost 4 takedowns per fight. He's a good counterpuncher with solid power. His counter striking works really well for him because he baits you into a striking match before he drops, lowers his level, and takes some shots. Even in fights where he's taken down, like when he fought Umar Nurmagomedov, he never stops moving, he never settles, and he never accepts the bottom position. I like Morozov to win this fight, and I like him to win because of the wrestling. If you look at Andrade's losses, he was taken down in every single one of them. I think Morozov can hang with the power, set a really hard pace, and then mix in takedowns to ride out a unanimous decision win. Andrade is probably the more technical BJJ practitioner, but I don't think it matters. I think this matchup is, it's going to be a lot of positions, and I think Morozov will have the better positions on top, solid pressure on top, avoid the big power striking from Douglas Andrade. Andrade has a world of experience here, so he may use that veteran savvy, but he tends to get sucked into firefights, and that's exactly when Sergey's going to drop, shoot, and just change the pace and not play that game. Then we move on to Jacob Malkoun versus AJ Dobson. Jacob Malkoun is a grappler who prefers to strike. He's heavy-handed and likes to plot forward, and he throws everything with power and loops. Even his jab isn't straight out. It's a little looping action that he sends it with, but he sends it with a lot of power. He steps into everything, which can leave him open for takedowns, but it does add a little sting to his strikes. He's a capable wrestler. He lowers his level. He times his shots well. Most of his shots are clean and in the middle of the cage, which works well for him. So he's not playing up against the cage, and he's sort of taken away any of that defense that people can play. Right smack in the middle of the cage, he'll lower his level and he'll take a shot. AJ Dobson has incredibly fast hands, knees, and kicks. He is not gun shy and will throw in combinations while moving forward. He has a ton of power to mix in with his speed. He does have some wrestling as well, but his takedowns really rely on his power more than his technique. He'll grab an underhook, try to push, bully you to the ground, but once he gets you to the ground, he's got solid fundamentals and solid control on top. He's a pretty well-rounded guy, but he's predominantly a striker. And for some reason, I hate this narrative. For some reason, people like to say fade the Contender Series guys. I think that's a ridiculous stance to take. Especially this card is ripe with people coming off of wins that were after a Contender Series win. I think that's a ridiculous narrative. And if we go look at Jalton Almeida just a few days ago, he absolutely decimated Danilo Marquez, and everybody was talking about fade the Contender Series guy. It's a nonsense narrative. Get that out of your head now. I like AJ in this fight. I do worry that if Jacob just ducks and shoots, he'll control AJ, but the fact that AJ is not gun shy at all and will have a very clear speed advantage, I like him to touch Jacob 3 times to every one. I think he's just going to be in his face, have crazy speed. He's got that power because Jacob Malkoun's throwing with the loops. Even a jab, which should be straightforward, he's still looping his jab, and that half a second will be the difference for somebody like AJ Dobson to laser right down the middle and just absolutely touch him up. So I am not fading the Contender Series guy. I hate that narrative. I think it's absurd. Hopefully all of you do, so I can keep a solid line on AJ Dobson here. The dude's a killer. I just hope he doesn't get out-wrestled. And we got Carlos Ulberg versus Fabio Cherant. Carlos Ulberg is a world-class kickboxer who transitioned to MMA about 10 years ago, even though he only has 4 professional fights. He's another one of those guys coming out of the city kickboxing gym with Izzy, with Dan Hooker, with this whole card is full of these guys. His most recent fight is a loss to Kennedy Nzechukwu, which he was dominating before he got caught. He's listed as having a 100% takedown defense, but he has only defended 1 single takedown, and that was an attempt from Kennedy Nzechukwu, who is not a wrestler. Fabio Cherant is a deceivingly athletic guy. He's had a rough road in the UFC, fought Alonzo Menafield on short notice, and then his next fight out was William Knight. Fabio has good power in his left hand. He's athletic. He's got solid submissions. But because he has no offensive wrestling, he can't dictate where a fight goes. So if he's stuck in his striking match, then he's stuck in a striking match because he can't force it to the ground. The best we've seen out of him is maybe catch a kick and then try to rush from there. And that's going to be rough for him because this is not a fight that he's probably going to want to keep on his feet. And it's a weird fight, though, because it's a very obvious fight, but it's also a little complicated because Ulberg is the obvious pick because he's an incredible kickboxer. And the fact that Fabio doesn't have wrestling to lean on, he can't really avoid that kickboxing. But Fabio really is much better than his UFC fights. If you only have seen his 2 UFC fights, then you think Fabio is just an absolute bum and he doesn't belong here. And that's not really the case. He sets a nice pace. He mixes in kicks really well. His chin is actually pretty solid. Listen, he was KO'd by William Knight, but honestly, anybody who gets hit flush by William Knight will get KO'd. That's just something that happens. And Ulberg doesn't have the same level of MMA experience, and he does tend to slow down as a fight goes on. In his interviews, he was frustrated in his fight against Kennedy because he felt like he hit Kennedy a ton, and he got frustrated that Kennedy wouldn't go down. And then he just like blew his load, wore himself out, and just... He said he wished he mixed in some wrestling and he didn't, and his confidence wasn't there, and that is because of lack of MMA experience and lack of MMA confidence. He's stuck with the striking because that's what he's known for. This is a more favorable matchup. I am going to lean Carlos Ulberg here, but let's not put so much stock into his kickboxing credentials and just ignore the fact that he doesn't really have a lot of MMA experience. So I imagine he'll be prepared. He's definitely had a solid MMA gym. Ulberg's the pick. But this is not, a 100% guarantee in Fabio Cherant. This may be a solid, I'm not going to say an underdog spot because I do think Ulberg wins. But Fabio Cherant's the type of guy that could absolutely pull something out. He's got experience. He's got power. He's a decent fighter. Then we have Alexander Hernandez taking on Renato Moicano. Alexander Hernandez has an interesting run in the UFC. He's alternating wins and losses. He looks like he can be a world champion in one fight, and then the next fight he goes out there and just a dud. He's beaten some really good people like Beneil Dariush, Francisco Trinaldo, which some people think he lost that fight, but it was still a very good fight. Alex is a solid wrestler. He's a solid athlete. He's got legitimate power, and he's got speed. His boxing is good, and he mixes in the speed and power well there, but sometimes he struggles to mix in the wrestling, which allows his opponents to settle into a rhythm, and then they pick him apart. Renato Moicano is a high-level BJJ black belt, and he actually just beat Chase Hooper in a grappling match, and not that that's the biggest accomplishment in the world, but Chase Hooper's a pretty decent grappler, and Renato Moicano had no issues there. He isn't a one-trick pony, though. He's a technical striker. He doesn't really have stoppage power, but he does have nice volume, and he sets a good pace. The concern, though, is his chin. While Moicano can hang with the better strikers as far as technique is concerned, his chin doesn't always hold up to that test. And this is an interesting fight. I think the odds are wide here. I understand why Moicano is a pretty big favorite. He's a solid technical striker. He's a very dangerous guy in the ground, but Alex is the better wrestler. He has very real power in his hands. And I think if Alex strikes with Moicano and does not threaten the takedowns, he's going to lose a kickboxing match. But he's going to end up chasing the knockout. It's not going to be there, and he's going to fall behind. Moicano will fall into a rhythm, and Alexander Hernandez is just going to get pieced apart. Literally exactly what just happened to Miles Johns last week at UFC Vegas 47. But if Alex mixes in a takedown or threatens a takedown or two, now all of a sudden he's got Moicano reacting, and do I sprawl, do I not sprawl? And that's when he can come up big with the power, with the speed, and really work in his strikes. He could also get some takedowns. He's got to be pretty careful on top, but he can get some takedowns and hang out on top. So I like Alex Hernandez here in the underdog spot, his raw athleticism, his raw power, and I just hope that he doesn't pull a Miles Johns and he actually at least threatens with the wrestling. At least threaten with it so Moicano can't just settle into a striking rhythm. So I like Alex Hernandez, the underdog here, but we'll see what happens. We're going to take a look at some bets when all the props drop because, I do like Alexander Hernandez. He's a tough guy. He's got real power. I think he could force some action. Then we've got Ronnie Lawrence taking on Mana Martinez. Ronnie Lawrence is a good wrestler who shoots and reshoots really well. He's athletic with solid footwork, and he uses leg kicks really well. And look at his takedown numbers. It's insane. It's insane what he makes happen in a fight with his wrestling. He had 8 takedowns against Vince Cicero, and that was a stoppage. He had 8 takedowns, and the fight didn't even go to the scorecards. Before that, he had 12 takedowns against Jose Johnson. And we don't have DraftKings numbers yet, but make sure Ronnie Lawrence is in your DraftKings lineup because at 5 points per takedown, you're going to clean up. Mana Martinez is an aggressive striker with solid power. He's always looking for a finish, and he switches his stance often, which can be complicated for his opponents. He also has solid counter-striking and very real power. Look what he did to Jose. Poor Jose Johnson took an L to both these guys last year. Jose threw a lazy jab, and Mana just went right over the top and just straight up KO'd him with one punch. Jose dropped like a bag of dirt. I mentioned the ridiculous number of takedowns that Ronnie has, but keep in mind, that means his opponents are getting up. If you have 12 takedowns, that means your opponent stood up 3 times. Even if you factor in, okay, the round was over, then subtract 2. The opponent stood up 9 times he got up on you. So that is a factor, which means that Mana is going to have a lot of opportunities on his feet to land that big shot and get things going with his hands. The reality is, though, I do see Ronnie Lawrence doing what he needs to do to shoot a million takedowns, control Mana Martinez, remove that power threat by wrestling nonstop. This is a pretty confident pick. I'm going with Ronnie and his wrestling. The odds are absurd in this fight, so he is more of a parlay piece than anything. I'm not straight money lining Ronnie Martinez at like -4, whatever he is right now. That moves us to William Knight versus Maxim Grishin. William Knight is stepping in on short notice for Ed Herman, who had to withdraw. William's a big guy. He cuts a lot of weight, and he's always training. So I'm not sure how out of shape he was or what his weight was coming into this fight. So I reached out to a few fellow Connecticut friends, some mutual friends of William Knight and I was like, listen, guys, straight up, is he in shape? Is he training? What's his deal? This is short notice. And they said, listen, he lives in the gym. I don't know his weight, but he does live in the gym. So, yeah, nobody's going to tell me the truth, right? They know I'm doing this show and I'm going to spill the beans. But that is a concern for me. Big guy, short notice, not a great combination. And just looking at William Knight, you know he has a ton of power, which he does. And you wouldn't assume he has cardio or that he's a solid wrestler, but he is. He's coming off a nice win over Alonzo Menafield where he was able to push the pace later in that fight. He's incredibly explosive. He throws everything with intent. He averages 2 takedowns per fight, which really helps mix things up. His opponents are worried about his power, and then he shoots some takedowns, which gets them worried about that. Maxim Grishin is a striker who throws in combinations, but he loves sitting on a big right hand. He loves waiting to throw that. He does do an amazing job of waiting and then rushing forward with combinations when there's an opening. As soon as he senses you're out of rhythm or you're off balance, he will pounce, he will attack. He's like a shark with blood in the water, and he has fantastic finish instincts. He is coming off a close decision loss to Dustin Jacoby, where a couple of missed takedowns, a couple of steps backward were the difference in that fight for the judges. But that was close. And this is another tough fight to call. I think a full camp William Knight and a short notice William Knight are 2 very different fighters, because I like Williams' normal style against Maxim. He's got great cardio, which means he can throw with power and he can wrestle. The reality is, I don't care if he's a gym rat and he's been in the gym. I don't think he's going to have the cardio that he needs to push a heavy pace, threaten with takedowns, and throw everything with intent. So I think it's a very scary first round for Maxim Grishin. And then William Knight is going to blow his load trying to get that early knockout, start to fade, and Maxim Grishin is going to take over. This is probably a live betting fight, so we can monitor William Knight's cardio and what he looks like. But listen, like I said, a full-blown camp William Knight, I pick him against Maxim Grishin. I love the matchup. I love the style. A short notice William Knight, who does rely on his cardio to push a pace, throw with power, and wrestle. I don't know if I'm going to get that on short notice. So the pick under these circumstances is Maxim Grishin. Then we've got Alex Perez versus Matt Schnell. And this is a rebooked fight from UFC 269 because Schnell wasn't medically cleared, and the odds are even wider now than they were last time. Last time around, Perez was a -330 favorite, and now he's a -400 favorite. So money came in, and the books correcting themselves. The whole world is betting on Alex Perez here. Alex Perez is a good striker, fantastic low kicks and solid wrestling. He is coming after a year layoff, but his low kicks are so devastating. He stopped Jussier Formiga with them last year. He comes in with solid combinations and he finishes those exchanges with leg kicks, and then he circles out. He averages 3 takedowns per fight, but the most impressive wrestling statistic is his 90% takedown defense. Matt Schnell is a very good counter striker with solid BJJ. He does an amazing job backing up 2 steps, and as you come in, he plants his feet, he comes forward with combinations, and he loves doing this off of leg kicks as well. His BJJ is slick, and he snatches things up in scrambles. This is a close fight. I like Schnell here. I really like Schnell here. I like that style. I like how he counter-strikes off the leg kicks, and you take a rusty Alex Perez, you have his leg kicks, Schnell's counter-striking from those leg kicks. I do like Schnell here, but his durability is a big concern. This is honestly a close pick. These odds are absurdly wide. The medical issues, I don't know what they were. Let me know in the comments if you do. The medical issues that Schnell had, probably weight cut related, are a concern here. The pick is going to be Alex Perez, but I may find a way to bet on Matt Schnell here because I do love the clash of styles. A rusty, year-long layoff Alex Perez throwing a lot of leg kicks. Matt Schnell's ability to counter leg kicks as well as he does. The durability is the only thing that worries me, but this should be a really fun fight. Then we've got Roxanne Modafferi's farewell fight. This is her retirement fight, and the UFC did not do her any favors in this matchup. Roxanne's a straight-up legend. She's very similar to Sam Alvey in that she shows up happy, smiling, and ready to go. She's not athletic at all. This poor woman has had to work for every inch of her fighting career because she does not have those natural gifts that others may. But she is very tough and has incredible fight IQ. Skill-wise, her striking is awkward, and she really uses it just to set up clinch work and takedowns. She's a much better grappler than she is striker, and her path to victory is always to slow down her opponents, get it to the cage or the ground, and grind out a win. She's not a stoppage threat, but she's also impossible to finish. And at her core, Casey O'Neill is a Muay Thai striker. She's got solid elbows. She's very willing to brawl, and she gets into firefights, but she has become somewhat of a wrestler lately. She's got 8 takedowns total in her last 3 fights. Her jiu-jitsu is lacking a bit, which could be an issue in this matchup. I think Casey will go back to her roots, keep this striking. If she's winning those exchanges, she'll probably stay there. If not, she does have a proven backup game plan with the wrestling. She would just have to be careful for Roxanne on the ground. I have all the respect in the world for somebody like Roxanne. She's put in the time. She has had a full career of fights that she put 100% effort into. Unfortunately, I do not see her leaving the sport with the win. Casey's too good everywhere. I see a dominant, one-sided decision win for Casey O'Neill. And my favorite parlay on this card is a Casey O'Neill and Ronnie Lawrence parlay. I already threw 2 units on that, and I got it at -110 because I think both of them are guaranteed winners. And you may even want to grab Casey O'Neill by decision because Roxanne is just so tough. We move over to the main fight for the prelim card. We've got Andrei Arlovski fighting Jared Vanderaa. I imagine everybody at this point knows who Andrei Arlovski is. But in case you don't, he's a straight-up legend, former world champion, future Hall of Famer, one of the more accomplished heavyweights to ever fight in the UFC. He has very good boxing, pretty good kicks, and as of late, he's had some decent grappling. He's been fighting for over 20 years, and not only does he bring all of that knowledge into every single fight, he somehow manages to make small adjustments, small improvements, even at 43 years old. And at 43, the big question is his chin. Will it hold up? And honestly, it's a weird question. It's a weird answer because 5 years ago, his chin was not holding up. That dude was getting laid out left and right. Wasn't even in the UFC. Now, all of a sudden, his chin seems to be holding up. He's taken some solid shots in his last few fights and didn't really have an issue. So, just like his short notice fight against Chase Sherman, took some shots, no problem. Carlos Felipe took some shots, no problem. Jared Vanderaa built his pre-UFC career in his grappling until his fight with Justin Tafa, where he just straight up turned into a volume striker. And now that's what he is. He's a volume striker. He's got a long jab, solid distance control, clean striking. And in addition to his size and wrestling, he could be a threat. He hasn't really showcased his wrestling in the UFC, but part of that is because he's been matched up with some wrestling beasts. I see this fight going pretty similar to Andrei Arlovski's fight versus Carlos Felipe. I think it's a 3-round kickboxing match. And the game plan that Jared used against Justin Tafa was just that. Let me strike with him. And it worked really well for him. So I imagine he's going to dig back into that and try to do that here. The problem, though, is Andrei Arlovski is not Justin Tafa. He's got incredible footwork, incredible speed. He doesn't stop moving. He hasn't been slowing down. And I think Andrei Arlovski outpoints Jared Vanderaa. I think he just jabs his way to a 3-round decision win, just like he did in his last 2 fights. Andrei Arlovski is the pick, but let's not sleep on Jared Vanderaa. That poor guy does not get the respect he deserves because he is really good. He's just gotten some really bad matchups in the UFC. Opening the main card, we've got Nasrat Haqparast taking on Bobby Green. Nasrat, very good striker, but he is coming off that loss to Dan Hooker where he had absolutely no answer for the wrestling. And that was a surprise because historically, he's had very good takedown defense. And even if he did get taken down, he used to just pop right back up. And if you ignore the Dan Hooker fight, let's just ignore that fight. You go back to the Alex Munoz fight. He defended 8 takedowns, and Alex Munoz is a fantastic wrestler. And I say all that because I think the grappling loss to Dan Hooker was more of a fluke than anything. He likely wasn't expecting to wrestle in that fight. And let's not forget, there was a million visa issues and stuff like that leading up to it. Bobby Green is a busy striker with a showboat style, but tons of volume and solid wrestling. He's coming off his first knockout in a while. He retired Al Iaquinta with a textbook 1-2. Before that, he had an awesome fight with Rafael Fiziev, where he hung with one of the best strikers in the division. He even stole that last round with just sheer grit and determination. He has that Roy Jones Jr. boxing style with low hands, and then he leaps in, jumps in with those punches. He's a very good grappler. He's good everywhere. Bobby Green's a legit threat, and that's why this is such an interesting matchup, because Nasrat's a fantastic striker who at one point was looked at as the future of the division, where Bobby has always been an incredibly talented guy who historically wasn't living up to his potential. He was losing some of those fights that he should have won, playing weird games in his fights, not grappling when he should have, and things like that. And I think if this fight stays standing, Nasrat will have the cleaner, more powerful strikes. But Bobby is so tough that he'll hang, he won't get finished. But if this fight goes to the ground, I think Bobby has a very clear advantage. The concern here is that Bobby does not always wrestle when he should. The concern is that Bobby just knocked out Al Iaquinta and may have fallen back in love with his hands and isn't going to wrestle. Bobby Green is my pick. It's a razor-thin, close pick because I am worried about his mindset and if he's going to wrestle or not, because I do think he needs to wrestle to win, because Nasrat is still very, very dangerous on his feet, and losing that fight to Dan Hooker might be the best thing that ever happened to Nasrat, because now he's like, Jesus, people are just going to try to take me down, and he's going to work on that takedown defense and be more prepared. We've got Jared Cannonier versus Derek Brunson. Jared Cannonier is very powerful with incredible leg kicks. He switches from southpaw to orthodox, and he throws kicks from both sides. He's got okay grappling. It's mostly defensive, though. He will want to keep this fight standing. He's massive, massive for this weight class. He started his career as heavyweight, and he's worked his way down to a jacked up middleweight. And if he ends up on top, he's got really, really solid pressure, tons of power, and he's impossible to get off of you. He just went 5 rounds with Kelvin Gastelum where he defended 8 takedowns. Derek Brunson has been a dominant wrestler as of late. His striking continues to improve, and he's mixing in his wrestling really well. Derek has some power, and if he threatens the takedowns, he may have some success striking, but his chin is worrisome. What's really impressive about Derek's wrestling is that he added it later in his career. If you look at his first 14 UFC fights, he had less than 10 takedowns total. Now in his last 5 fights, he has 19 takedowns total. He's really transformed who he is, and you can really give that credit to his gym and his wrestling. This is a really interesting fight because it's a clash of styles. Jared with the big power and the wrestling defense against Derek with the questionable chin and the wrestling offense. I've got to go with Jared here. I totally understand Derek Brunson's wrestling is a threat. It's a very clear path to victory. But I like Jared Cannonier to defend those takedowns. And because even in fights that he was taken down, he won by knockout. Jack Hermanson, David Branch, high-level grapplers, they took him down. He knocked them out. I think Jared Cannonier gets it done. Derek Brunson's chin is questionable, and he's had success with the wrestling, but I'd say Kelvin Gastelum is a better wrestler who did not have success. That moves us to Kyler Phillips versus Marcelo Rojo and what may be the fight of the night. 2 really exciting guys that are very, very busy. Kyler Phillips is a very diverse striker, a well-rounded fighter overall. He can strike, he can grapple. His feet are always moving, which makes him difficult to hit and to take down. Most of the time, Kyler does a very good job mixing things up, but he is willing to slug it out and put on a show, and that can be a problem for him. 3 out of his 4 official UFC fights have been performance of the night bonuses, including his loss to Rulian Paiva, where if you look at the stats, he won. But if you watch the fight, that wasn't really what happened. Marcelo Rojo is coming off the loss to Charles Jourdain, but let's not forget he took it on short notice, and that was up a weight class. We also can't forget that he was winning that fight before ultimately gassing and being stopped. He's a very exciting fighter who comes forward with solid pressure and hands. His offensive wrestling can use some work, but his wrestling defense is very good. Theoretically, it's an easy pick, right? Kyler's going to have the more technical striking, definitely be the better grappler. But the reality is that he's made mistakes in his fights that cost him. If he makes those same mistakes against a very game Marcelo Rojo, he could find himself in some trouble because Rojo has a knack for sneaking out those late, surprising wins. So I am going to go with Kyler here. I think he wins a really competitive back and forth fight, and I think he will lean on his wrestling to get that done. But this is probably a plus 3.5 prop bet. And what that is you buy one single round on the judge's scorecard. So if I take Marcelo Rojo, who's the underdog, I buy one round on the scorecard. All I need him to do is win one round on his own. And if he does, I get paid out. You're only going to get that bet if you go to wewantpicks.com/bets. Bet Online is the betting partner that does it. Sign up, make a deposit, let me know. I'll send you $50. That moves us to the co-main event of the evening, Derek Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa. And every single Derek Lewis breakdown is exactly the same. That dude has sledgehammers attached to his hands. He hits like an absolute freight train. He's a very low volume guy. He has no problem waiting, getting taken down, waiting, and then bang, landing that big shot. He has done it a million times over. Even if you look all the way back to that Volkov fight, he was dominated the entire fight, and bang, big power shot, won it with like, a minute left in that fight. And that's who Derek Lewis is as a fighter. He's never the most technical guy. He's never the toughest. He's never the fastest, but he is always the hardest hitting, and one shot will get it done. Tai Tuivasa is a much better striker. He mixes in leg kicks really well. He also has power in his hands, and he's got a solid chin. We did see that chin get tested, though. Greg Hardy cracked Tai Tuivasa, cracked him. And Tai Tuivasa looked like it was going to be a problem. He ended up winning that fight. But if that exact same punch lands from Derek Lewis and not Greg Hardy, Tai Tuivasa was probably going to be out cold. This is a tough fight because every single Derek Lewis fight is exactly the same. He's not as good as his opponent, but he's always live for the knockout. I, again, am going to pick against Derek Lewis. I think Tai Tuivasa is the better striker. I think his chin is good enough to at least absorb one shot. So I think his chin is good enough to weather a storm, even though he's not really known for storms, Derek Lewis. But I think his chin could keep him in the fight. Tai Tuivasa should work in the leg kick, slow down Derek Lewis, and go from there. We saw Derek Lewis break with Cyril Gane. This fight is also in Houston. Derek Lewis may be way amped up, but last time he fought in Houston, he was not. I like Tai Tuivasa to chop down the tree with those leg kicks, but if that dude ends up flatlined like any other Derek Lewis fight, it would not be surprising. But Tai Tuivasa is the pick here. Then we've got the main event of the evening, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2, and this is a rematch. So let's talk about what happened in the first fight. That first fight, Robert Whittaker came out there just charged at Israel Adesanya, and he would charge in, duck his head, and just throw big punches, reaching to the taller, higher opponent, just coming in, big punch, come in, big punch. And he had some success. He landed a few. He had some success. He definitely pushed the pace. Izzy was backing up. And if you don't count the last second of the first round, I had Robert Whittaker winning that round. Just forward pressure, and he landed some shots. And if you look at the stats, they were basically even, except with like 2 seconds left. Israel Adesanya just bloop, drops Robert Whittaker, hits the ground, lands a few shots there. So Robert Whittaker ends up losing the round, but if he didn't get dropped, which sounds stupid, if he didn't get dropped, he wins that round. And I'm just bringing that up to add some context, because if you didn't see that fight and all you see was Robert Whittaker lost by TKO, KO, you're going to think it was decimation. And it wasn't. He was dominating the first, not dominating, but winning the first round, clipped. Second round, more of the same. He regrouped, came out, charged forward, more of the same, winning, clipped, and then this time he was done. It's very clear Israel Adesanya is far more precise, has far more power, but Robert Whittaker had no problem getting in there and mixing it up. He then took about a year off, 8-9 months off. He came back. He has 3 really nice wins in a row. Really nice wins in a row. His striking has looked fantastic. He's managed to control himself while keeping the forward pressure, and his grappling looks like it took a step up. He absolutely earned this rematch, and he was very clear. He said, Jan Blachowicz gave us the path, told us how to beat Israel Adesanya, and I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to get in his face, I'm going to take him down, and that's how I'm going to beat him up. And that's what Jan Blachowicz did. And honestly, this is a really tough fight to pick because I think Robert Whittaker is going to do that. I think he's going to get in his face, take him down, and then try to beat him up from there. The problem is we just saw Marvin Vettori try to do that. Marvin Vettori had success, took Izzy down 4 times, and he still lost that fight because Izzy had some surprises on the ground for him. Had some real surprises on the ground for him. Reversed some positions, made some things happen. And then obviously on their feet, Izzy's going to touch people up and do what he does. So I think this is a much, much more competitive fight. I think it's closer to a pick'em. I do think Israel Adesanya gets it done because the one path to victory is the grappling. And, Marvin Vettori just tried that, and it didn't really work out for him. He was taken down a few times, and he still was able to pull out that win. I like Israel Adesanya to win by decision in a very, very competitive fight. And I may buy a few rounds on the judges' scorecard for Robert Whittaker because I think he can win a few rounds. I absolutely think he can before the damage starts coming. And I do think it's a decision. Guys, go to wewantpicks.com/bets. Sign up with any one of our 5 betting partners. Make a deposit. Let me know after you do. And I'll send you $50 as a thank you. And make sure you like and subscribe. We will break this fight down, this whole card down in much more detail. We'll take our time. It'll be myself and Jacob, so you'll get multiple perspectives. And that is every single Tuesday night. We do every single card at 8:30 Central. Like, subscribe. I'll see you then.